the former capital of Prussia, today nicknamed the Trojan Horse in the heart of Europe. Yes, we are going to talk about Kaliningrad, a piece of Russia away from Russia. Hello and welcome to 7 Facts. Out of the many federal subjects of Russia, Kaliningrad is the odd one out. It sits on the coast of the Baltic Sea, surrounded by Poland and Lithuania, but none of the other Russian territories. In other words, it's an exclave and there's no direct route between here and the rest of Russia. The place is tiny, one of the smallest regions in the country. Nevertheless, it has one of the best performing economies thanks in part to its proximity to the EU. So, what's up with this place? How did it come to exist so far from the rest of the country? Well, don't go anywhere, cause I'm about to explain it all. Okay, so let's start with the history. Up until the Middle Ages, this territory was inhabited by Baltic tribes known today as the Old Prussians. While today we associate Prussians with the German culture, that wasn't the case back then. The Old Prussians were Baltic people who were conquered by the Teutonic Order in the early 1200s. They were a German Catholic order from the era of the Crusades, and once they conquered Prussia, they proceeded to transform the lands. And transform they did. On the foundations of a destroyed Prussian settlement, Tvangsta, the Teutonic Knights founded Königsberg, resettled the territory with Germans and assimilated the Old Prussians. By the 18th century, the language and culture of the Old Prussians were completely gone. Slowly but surely, Prussia became the strongest of the German states, especially within the German Empire. However, Prussia's domination came to an abrupt end after World War I. West Prussia became part of Poland, while East Prussia was now an exclave of the newly founded German Republic known today as the Weimar Republic. Of course, as we all know, Nazis eventually took over, started the Second World War, and lost. This is the moment German East Prussia ceased to exist and the current state of affairs began to emerge. On August 29, 1944, Soviet troops reached the border of East Prussia. During the fightings and bombings and after the Soviet conquest, around 300,000 people died and 2 million fled before the Red Army. Stalin insisted that war-torn East Prussia was to be divided between the USSR, Lithuania and Poland. The United States and the United Kingdom agreed. In 1946, Königsberg was renamed Kaliningrad in honor of the late Mikhail Kalinin, the official head of state of the USSR. A mass expulsion of German ethnics followed. Those who fled could not return. Those who stayed were either expelled or sent to labor camps. Russian, Ukrainian and Belarusian ethnics were brought in to repopulate Kaliningrad, thus erasing all traces of German heritage. Cities, towns, rivers and other geographical features were changed to Russian names, and Kaliningrad officially became a part of the Russian Soviet Republic. Before we go to the next fact, I'd like to ask you something. This video isn't sponsored, so perhaps you'd consider supporting this channel by becoming a patron. If you still enjoy my content, go visit my Patreon page and help this channel out. And with that said, let's go to fact number 4. The capital of the oblast is the city of Kaliningrad. During World War II, the city was almost completely destroyed but was rebuilt under the new Soviet administration. Being the westernmost city of the USSR, it became a major strategic territory and thus was close to any foreign visitors. Much of the old German architecture was destroyed during World War II, but some did survive and was restored. The city is thus a mixture of German, Soviet and modern architecture, plentifully dotted with parks and lots of green areas. It's also filled with museums, theaters and concert halls, making Kaliningrad a prime tourist destination. Economy-wise, they're not doing bad either, although after the collapse of the Soviet Union they had it rough. In short, Kaliningrad is probably one of the most interesting places to visit in Russia, with a long, rich and tumultuous history. Kaliningrad is surrounded by countries of both the EU and NATO. It is thus one of the most militarized areas of Russia and Europe as a whole. This is why Kaliningrad is often called a Trojan horse of Europe, The province is effectively a beachhead for political, economic, and actual armed conflict. This isn't a new thing. During the Cold War era, Kaliningrad was already a major military base, but after the collapse of the Soviet Union, it found itself isolated from Russia. Much of the Soviet equipment pulled out of Eastern Europe was brought here, and thousands of Russian troops were stationed in the oblast. Russia's Baltic Fleet is also headquartered here. Short-range missiles are still present in Kaliningrad, and as we all know from the news, encounters and teases between Russian and NATO forces have been on the rise for years now. While politically the situation is quite tense, on the ground reality is a bit different. Thanks to its isolation from the rest of Russia and frequent trips to and from EU territories, Kaliningrad is actually the most EU-friendly province of the country. Kaliningrad has a very diverse ethnic heritage. Throughout its history, the territory housed Old Baltics, Lithuanians, Poles, Latvians, Jews, and Russians. But what about today? Who lives in Kaliningrad today? Well, the place is undeniably Russophone, with almost none of the pre-World War II populations remaining today. 86% of the people are Russians and 7% are Ukrainians and Belarusians, nearly all of them descendants of those brought here to replace the expelled Germans. By the way, most of those people had no choice in the matter. If you were selected to come here, you came. However, there are still thousands of Germans, Lithuanians and Poles living here. This, however, can be deceiving. Many of these people are relatively recent immigrants who came here from other parts of the former Soviet Union where they were deported decades ago. So basically, there is no continuity of German or other cultural heritage in Kaliningrad, and for all intents and purposes, these lands are now Russian. After 1991, Kaliningrad faced a near collapse on its own. The oblast was now surrounded by independent countries that later joined the EU and NATO, and all military, commercial, and personal ties with the rest of the country had to go through strict border controls. Adding salt to the wound, there was a significant reduction in military personnel, thus further plummeting Kaliningrad's economic prospect. But the local authorities have managed to stop this downward spiral towards collapse. They made use of their ice-free ports, created a special economic zone where investors benefited from tax incentives, and consolidated their economic ties with the EU. As such, instead of a collapse, Kaliningrad experienced a boom. Car manufacturing, shipbuilding, electronics, and high-tech industries form the basis of the oblast's economy. They also have the largest amber deposits in the world, so that's a major plus for them. Although isolated, Kaliningrad managed to make the best of what it has. Please leave a like and subscribe if you enjoyed this content. Leave your comments downstairs, and don't forget there's a Patreon page where you can support this channel. I hope to see you next time. Bye.